What if my teenager is depressed? You may be wondering why we need to talk about depression in a book about parent-teen control battles. Before we dive into that, let's take a look at what depression is and is not. Depression can most succinctly be described as a pervasive unhappiness with a lack of motivation or enthusiasm for life. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration estimates that 11.4% of adolescents aged 12 to 17 experienced a major depressive episode in 2014, Center for Behavioral Health Statistics and Equality 2015. We can therefore assume that depression is going to be a problem for many teens and their families at some point during their adolescence. When people are depressed, they feel removed from those around them, like they're alone in a fog and unable to see anything beyond it. They most often lack energy, and doing even small things can take a lot of effort. To depression sufferers, it seems as if they will always feel this way. They often lack motivation to change anything, having little faith that they'll ever feel better no matter what they do. Depression can take many forms. The most obvious symptoms are a tendency to isolate oneself, a loss of interest in previously enjoyed activity and friendship, and extreme sadness, often with long periods of crying. Other symptoms include a loss of appetite or overeating, difficulty or increased sleeping, chronic fatigue, physical ailments, and at its most extreme, suicidal thinking and behavior. Often, particularly among adolescents, other conditions and behaviors co-occur with depression, such as anorexia or bulimia, substance abuse, promiscuity, and self-cutting. Is it sadness or depression? All of us can be sad or moody from time to time. Sadness is a normal emotional reaction when something bad happens, such as when your teenager's best friend suddenly becomes someone else's best friend and your teen is shunned, or when a kid doesn't get selected to make the team, doesn't get a major role in the school play, or doesn't get invited to the parties that the other kids are being invited to. All these things are hurtful and can cause sadness. But when the sadness is ongoing, lasting weeks instead of days, and begins to interfere with the teen's daily life, then it could be depression. Any kind of loss can cause extreme sadness. Whether the loss is of a family member or friend, or a pet, a child or teen will quite naturally experience grief. However, if the grief reaction becomes chronic, it can signal depression. Where does depression come from? Several factors contribute to the onset of depression, and through these apply to children, teens, and adults. Let's talk about them primarily from the perspective of adolescents. Low self-esteem. Low self-esteem makes teens more emotionally susceptible to rejection, hurt, and dwelling on personal failures. It interferes with taking healthy risks and making self-valuing personal choice. Low self-esteem encourages self-destructive choice, including poor social choice, low effort, and substance abuse, all leading to or increasing depression. A lack of social emotional support. Kids need to feel understood, validated, and supported for who they are and what they feel. They need recognition for their accomplishments. Without that, they'll feel disconnected, isolated, and alone. A lack of physical activity. As we talked about in the section on happiness in Chapter 7, physical activity is vital to a healthy mood and brain. Without it, depression is more likely to occur and less likely to abate. A lack of perceived empowerment. Teens need opportunities to set and achieve personal goals. It's vital for them to know that regardless of what they choose to do, they can pursue their goals. They need to know that there is a real opportunity for them to achieve and be successful in any environment in which they are placed: school, sports team, home, job, or camp. When students are placed in environments where their best efforts are likely to repeatedly fail, or the expectations are unreasonably high, they can experience chronic stress, and that will commonly lead to depression. Trauma. Any highly stressful event that leaves a person feeling unsafe, helpless, and not having control over the situation can be traumatic. And a primary symptom of trauma is depression. When kids are exposed to physical or verbal violence, a severe traffic accident, the sudden death of a loved one, sexual abuse, or violence in their neighborhood or home, they will commonly experience depression. Genetics. Individuals who have a family history of depression can be more susceptible to depression. Just reading all this might be enough to depress a parent, yet there is reason to be optimistic. Although depression is very serious, it is also very treatable. With high-quality professional help, and with our help developing our teens' happiness skills, described in the previous chapter, teens can come through their depression and thrive. Control battles and depression. The control battle itself can cause or contribute to depression. As we discussed in chapter 1, when the control battle beast is thriving in a family, it has a negative impact that can play out in a variety of ways, including depression in any member of the family. In the case of parents, depression can be the result of worry and burnout. In the case of siblings, it might come out of stress and feeling unimportant in the family. And for the teenager directly involved in the control battle, depression can arise from feeling criticized, alienated, and unable to be successful. These are very serious situations. Fortunately, when skills for ending the control battle are applied and we starve the beast, depression will leave with the beast and life can go forward in a healthy way. Sometimes, however, teenage depression will be the centerpiece of a control battle. When a teenager becomes depressed, it's vital that action can be taken to address the situation, and informed and caring parents will do just that. Unfortunately, many professional approaches for treating teen depression relegate the parents to a marginalized role in the treatment, disempowering them from being the resource their teenager needs. Many therapists will work with a teenager individually and perhaps give the parents only updates or piece of advice outside the presence of the teenager. The parents will view the therapist as the person who holds the key to curing their teenager's depression and will miss how important it is that they remain actively involved. Another disempowering solution is when parents take their teen to a physician who simply prescribes an antidepressant medication as the first response without requiring or even recommending counseling. Many therapists and physicians work beautifully and effectively with teenagers and their families. Unfortunately, there are also many who will utilize medication or individual therapy without taking the time to understand the context, the family dynamics that relate to the problem and its solution. The unintentional undermining of the parental role leaves the teenager without the primary resource need to return to a healthy crossing of his or her developmental footbridge. Anita revisited. Let's see how this happened with Anita, the shy, quiet girl from chapter 7, whose parents kept trying to make her happier. The more they tried, the more Anita resisted until they had established a robust control battle. Anita's parents had become in charge of making Anita happy, and Anita was in charge of them failing to make her happy. Anita found middle school and the clique and the social stressors very hard to deal with. By the time Anita was a 15-year-old high school freshman, she had developed a very negative identity. She socialized with boys and girls who wore only black, symbolic of their identification with all things dark and depressing. She had a 17-year-old boyfriend who went to an alternative school for at-risk youth. Anita's parents discovered that she had been superficially cutting herself, which alerted them that professional help was needed. They got Anita into therapy with a well-respected therapist who recommended a psychiatric evaluation. Although they were skeptical about medication, they went along with the recommendation for Anita to begin taking an antidepressant. After a while, they noticed an improvement. Anita was less negative at home and did come to some meals, but she still retreated quickly to her room. There were good days and bad days. During the first half of her freshman year, and a concern for Anita was still foremost in her parents' minds. They had disciplined her for smoking marijuana and some alcohol use. There was one frightening occasion when they allowed her to go to a concert and sleep at a friend's house, only to receive a call from one of Anita's friends that she was extremely drunk and had passed out. No adult was there, and they were worried. Her parents picked Anita up and took her to the hospital emergency room, where she was observed for several hours and then sent home. Anita's parents were extremely upset. They grounded her for a month, but they did let her boyfriend come over and spend time at the house because they were afraid that isolation would only increase their daughter's depression. Anita's parents were constantly trying to find a balance between allowing privileges so that Anita wouldn't be depressed and withholding privileges because Anita abused them and wasn't managing her responsibilities. Very little, in fact, had changed since the 5th grade. Anita's parents still acted from the belief that they were in charge of making her happy, and Anita seemed to be in charge of resisting them and making herself unhappy. This was the essential structure of their control battle. After hearing me speak at their daughter's high school, Anita's parents called for a consultation, and I invited them all to come in together. I listened carefully to each of their stories. From Anita, I learned how strict and controlling her parents were, and from her parents, I heard how hard they tried to make things nice for Anita, who never appreciated anything. Anita's parents wanted to know if Anita was ever going to get over her depression and move forward in life. Were they ever going to be able to stop worrying about her? I explained to Anita and her parents that the way things were going, the answer was no. As long as Anita's parents were responsible for Anita's happiness and Anita was not, Anita would be depressed and continue to make self-destructive decisions. Anita responded, "I can't help it that I'm depressed." And her parents went silent, waiting for my response. This was the proverbial elephant in the room. The depression was in charge, not Anita. I emphasize with and validate Anita's struggle with depression. Depression can be extremely debilitating, and I conveyed a deep understanding of that to Anita and her parents. Anita, Neil. Anita, I get it that depression is no fun at all, but what is your plan for curing it? Anita, I'm going to therapy and taking antidepressants. What else am I supposed to do? Neil, it's excellent that you are taking action to treat your depression. Anita, what have you and your therapist worked out for your plan? I know your therapist, and although we haven't discussed your case, I'm sure she's given you lots of ideas to help yourself. Anita, yeah, well, I do them sometimes, but sometimes I'm too depressed and I just don't feel like it. Mom, I don't think I've heard about this. What are you supposed to be doing to help yourself? Anita, she says I'm supposed to get exercise and take an after-school art class. I go for walks once in a while, but it doesn't help much. I called the art school once, but they weren't starting a new class for a month or so. Mom, and so did you sign up for the next class? Anita, no, I forgot about it. I was too far off. Besides, I just like to do art with my friends. We hang out and draw, and I do plenty of art. I don't need to go to a class and do more. I don't even know those people in the class. Dad, Anita, I don't know what the point of going to therapy is if you're not going to listen to the therapist advice. Anita, I like my counselor, but I don't get how going to an art class is going to cure my depression. Neil, the way you're thinking about things, Anita, you're likely to stay pretty stuck. It sounds like you and your parents are being held hostage to the depression. Mom, that's exactly how we feel. Is there anything we can do? Neil, yes there is. Depression is very treatable. I drew this diagram on the whiteboard, see figure 3, and explained. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all affect and are affected by each other. In other words, how we feel affect how we think and how we behave. How we behave affect how we think and feel, and how we think affect how we feel and behave. You may notice that we can control our behavior, and we can even turn negative thoughts into positive ones if we try. The one area we don't have direct control over is our feelings.